Hey everyone, welcome back. I've been waiting a long time to talk to Hailey, Dr. Hailey Heard. I mean, our paths cross because our nutrigenomic DNA community is small but growing. But
Mhm.
so our paths cross a lot. And as we talk about science and DNA comes across our radar, we chat. But this is the first time I really get a chance to chat to Hailey because I'm normally watching her in her office hours saying, now what's she talking about today? So finally I get to talk to you. So welcome, Hailey.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, can't wait to talk to you. So just before we jumped on, I said, Hailey, you're actually a chiropractor by training.
Mhm.
So talk about your journey as a chiropractor and how you ended up in this field of genetics, DNA testing.
Dumb luck is the short story there. But I think I would say like most chiropractors I know, at least a lot of my colleagues and my friends, we became chiropractors because we had a health crisis ourselves.
Interesting.
So I was actually on my undergrad, my master's degree are all in theology. So I was actually on route to be either an Episcopal priest or a professor. Hadn't quite decided which one I wanted to do. And when I was 23, 20, between 21 and 23, I don't remember anymore. I got deathly ill and couldn't figure out what was going on. Wicked migraines. Half my body was going numb. I gained a whole bunch of weight, didn't know what was happening. And modern medicine had no answers for me. They just said, eat less calories,
Of
which,
course. Move more, eat less.
yeah, and that wasn't even the issue. And so I actually found at the time what would be called an alternative MD, because I don't even think functional medicine or integrative MD were words that were used. She called herself an alternative medical doctor. She did all sorts of tests, the original Genova tests, all
Yeah.
things that are seemingly commonplace in our world today. She did on me decades ago, and basically boiled down to like, okay, massive autoimmune hot mess, right? I've been diagnosed with everything from rheumatoid arthritis to celiac to MS, and there was no obvious reason and or therapy that could be done for me. So at the same time, I had significant back pain. I had fallen downstairs carrying all my guitars. I'm a musician, so I was in a dorm room in college, fell down stairs and herniated three of my vertebra, or of my discs in my lumbar vertebra. And so I was in massive pain and getting sick and didn't know what was happening. Fortunately, my spouse took me to my first chiropractor, and I thought that was like, I had never even heard of chiropractic. It wasn't
Right.
something commonplace in my world. And I thought that doctor was a magician because I got out of pain in 2 weeks and I was walking and I was no longer this, what I felt like a very, like an invalid. I mean, I was bedbound and unable to participate in life for the most part. Um, so, between my chiropractor at the time and my medical doctor who was treating me nutritionally, I thought it was just the best thing in the world. And I started paying more attention to my health care on the natural front than I did my studies. So, of course, I graduated and did everything, but I was like, you know what? I don't really want to go be in this ethereal world of theology. I want to actually do something tangible and help people that are just like me. And that kind of drove my spouse and I went to chiropractic school because I never wanted to be a medical doctor. I never wanted to do anything in the traditional world. I really loved the vitalistic philosophy of chiropractic, that the body heals itself from the inside
Mhm.
out. And I said, I want to do that, and I want to help people that had the same issues I did. Fast forward a few years later, graduated with my chiropractic degree. And I always went into it wanting to do more of the nutrition side of things than the actual manual adjusting. I do
Interesting.
have chiropractic clients in Houston. It's a very, I'd say maybe 5% of our clinic is actually chiropractic. But the rest of it has just been nutrition. And I started reading anything and everything I could in the nutritional world. And of course, genetics ended up being a part of that. And I've done all, various tracks for functional medicine training, and you name it, I've probably done it. And the thing that I kept coming back to with my patients was okay, I'm doing all the right things for nutrition. I'm doing the right tests. I'm doing, micronutrient testing, organic acid testing, yada, yada, yada. I've done it all. But there's a piece that's missing. And so I jumped on the Ben Lynch bandwagon. I did all many moons ago, did all his training. Paul Anderson did that kind of stuff. Like, it was just, that was the thing that sparked my brain and made me so happy. And I was like, oh, this makes sense. So then I could take, the company who shall not be named, really big named genetic testing raw data everyone would bring to me.
Right.
And I'd start to use through the resources we had. And eventually I was just like, something's not quite right here. And I am that personality that says, okay, I can do this better. And as it would turn out, and this is where the dumb luck part comes in, I hooked up with a PhD geneticist here out of Rice University and said, okay, I want a test that does this, this, and this.
Right.
What can we do? Point me to a lab. How do we make this happen? And it was just this beautiful meeting of the minds. And I also randomly met Chad Yarbrough on my alumni Facebook group. And his first comment was, someone tagged me in a post on Facebook and said, what would you do? And I was talking about certain supplement products from Zymogen for them. And he chimed in. He was like, I like this girl. I agree with what she says. And that was literally how our friendship started.
Right.
And I came to him and I said, look, I've got this geneticist. I've got this lab. Here's what I want to do. Do you want in? Do you want to, how can we make this work? Originally, we were thinking of purely doing more of an educational style business, kind of like Ben Lynch does, for providers and for the public. And for some wonderfully unknown reason, the universe decided to say, nope, y'all are going to actually become a lab. So we were able to.
Yeah.
So, word of mouth, it has been very good to us the past 2 years. And, of course, everyone has hiccups in business. So we've figured out what exactly works for us. How do we get this information? And we started as a direct-to-consumer lab.
That's right.
And now we are helping over 400 practitioners across the world do nutrigenomic testing, and still working with the public as well, and trying to make this kind of commonplace in every household now.
Bingo. So we're going to come back. That's a short, long story, But you are actually still practicing as a clinician as well.
I'm clinic in Houston. Yeah.
Yeah, in Houston. So Hailey's company is MaxGen Labs, and we're going to come back to that because it's actually one of the testing companies that I use a lot. And it's actually, your reports is what I actually use, not only with my own clients, because you see who's ordering, right? But also I use it as a great training tool when I'm working with clinicians to learn how to look at a test and why it's organized the way it is, and why they're testing these specific gene variants, how you put together a story from that. But go back to one thing that you said that really struck me, which is, you could get all this advanced functional testing, from our, very good labs, yet there was still something missing. Right. Yep. It's like you would get this impression, but your clinical intuition couldn't take you to the next step. It's like, well, I think it is this, or this is maybe what's going on, because it's very, very good testing. And I agree with you that getting a DNA test or nutrigenetic test, a dual genetic test in the vein that you're doing is the signpost, right? It says, look for this. And sure enough, I just did one yesterday using your review with a client with your test, and sure enough, there's our organic acid testing, there's the DNA, and it's about a 95% fit, right? Or validation. Is that what you see too?
Absolutely. I used to be the person that said, okay, I can't just do genetic testing on you. I need to look, genetics are your blueprint. Let's look at how you're actually functioning today. But I've done this so long now, and I've seen thousands of reports and done all these test reviews. Now I'm like, oh, we can just start with genetics because
Right.
when you're looking at the right thing, you know where to go from there.
Exactly. And then the lab is a validator. And oftentimes now you can, as long as it's a very good lab, we don't need to go through the rigors of all these really advanced testing. I mean, I think it just depends, but you see the validation there. But are you able to sort of back it up into more general labs, if you say, you know, if you, I know that's like a big
Yeah.
term.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because we have honed in our own clinical practice to do genetic testing, and we use the one test from Genova, which is just it's a urine-based organic acid type test. So we get to see the actual basic deficiencies and if there are any minor infections. And then I do a comprehensive bioscreen through LabCorp. So if we need to look at thyroid markers and iron
Right.
and all that kind of stuff, but between those three tests, I would say 95% of my cases are super easy to help.
It's
The
amazing, isn't
Yeah,
it? It's, I mean, obviously, if you've got some advanced infection or whatever, it's a little bit more
sure. Yeah,
difficult. The microbiome's involved. Yeah,
absolutely.
but
And
nutrition,
that's where we can pull from other tests. Like I did set a stool test off yesterday for a patient, but that's only after months of doing other stuff, and there's still just this little tiny gut issue going on. So,
yeah.
but I wouldn't have started there.
No, exactly. So here's a question I have for you. We're going to get off into the minutiae here for those of you who are clinicians. Yeah, because like you said, when you see enough testing, you see patterns. You
Yeah,
never say, well, this, I can almost guarantee this is going to show up because that's not true.
yeah.
But one thing I've noticed is there's this sort of trifecta, triad between the FUT2 gene, FUT2,
Mm. Oh, my favorite.
TCN, folate, and B12. I mean, and it's almost like you see this, you said, so how is your gut? Have you had any, you know, how do you feel? And it's
Yeah.
so often that FUT2 gene in conjunction with these other genes, inevitably there's going to be dysbiosis. Not always. Is that your observation too?
100%.
Oh,
If they're non-secretor, if they're non-secretor,
non-secretor.
their gut is wonky. My technical term there. And almost always on top of that, we're dealing with an autoimmune case too.
Yeah.
So almost
Genes don't lie. You know, I mean, you can't say, well, if you see this, it's this, but almost always. And of course, I think that's influenced deeply by the environment too, you know, stress. And it may be 100 years ago, you could be a non-secretor and it wasn't an issue, but now
yeah,
we don't know.
yeah.
But yeah, I see that. And it's, wow.
That's definitely an interesting one. And there's if you get into the nitty gritty of FUT2, there's a lot of people who think one thing about the gene and some people think other things about the gene. And all I notice is that if I see a non-secretor, I'm seeing gut dysbiosis 100% of the time.
Yeah, I do too. So those of you listening out there as clinicians, so you're hearing us observation, you're looking at hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tests and seeing these patterns. You know, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, but
Yeah.
what I find so useful in DNA testing is it guides your thinking.
Yeah.
And it cuts out so much noise of what ifs. And you and I know, because you'll sit on a list and say, well, I have a client who showed up with A, B, C, an income, 100 responses. Well, maybe they have celiac. Maybe you should try this supplement. Maybe you should try that. And it's disturbing.
Yeah. I think it cuts out a lot of the guesswork. So that's my biggest reason I love genetics is because I no longer have to guess which supplement to give you or which direction to go down, which test to do next. It's like, oh, let's look at this and take your health history into consideration, and everything just lines up beautifully.
It does. And for those who may be sensitive to supplements, yeah, you can certainly say, okay, well, we're going to try this with, you know, hardcore nutrient focused food. You know, so test, intervene with food, retest, don't respond. Okay, we're going to hit you, you know, with some concentrated source of food, which may be through a supplement. We can always retest. So I think it saves time, it saves money, it saves a lot of angst for the client or the patient, and us too. It's like, oh my God, you know, it's
you kind of just said the key words, at least from a public perspective. It saves you time and money. And when I'm talking to clinicians about using MaxGen, you know, we often say this will not only increase your revenue, it's going to make your patients happier because you're going to get so much less pushback. When they can see their genes, because those don't change, we only have to do that once, right? When they can see their genes, they're going to be like, oh, this makes so much sense. And then you don't have to spend your time doing a million different tests and charging them astronomical dollars. And you actually find answers, and it just works.
It does. And you know what's amazing to me, and I know you see it all the time, is you're sitting and you open up this story. It's your gene story. And we all tell the story a little differently. But you know, a lot of times when I'm working with clinicians, the first thing I'll do is say, well, you have to do your own DNA test. I'll walk you through it.
Oh yeah.
And they just, you know, because it's like you have to walk the walk before you can talk the talk. If you don't do it on your shelf, you cannot talk to someone because it's so revelatory. But I'll be working on Zoom like I'm talking to you, and I open up and I that their gene story, and we put it up, you know, we share their screen, and they're just looking down. They look at me like, I can't believe this. How many times do you see that? It's just like, I can't believe what you're telling me.
Yeah. And just so you know, I was our very first guinea pig when we were developing our panels. Because I was that weird, you know, unicorn that walks into a functional medicine provider and be like, fix me. I don't know what's going on. And so we developed the panels we have based off of our unicorn patients.
Oh, that's great. So that would explain some of your gene choices. Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting.
So it was kind of a matter of, well, these are our toughest cases. And if we can make this work for our toughest cases, imagine how good it's going to be for the quote unquote easy cases. So
yeah, I mean, there's two sort of layers I see. As I look at it, there's two directions of DNA. It's for people who just can't get their health restored. You know, this gives us such deep underpinnings or deep direction. Mm-hmm. But the antithesis of that is people who want to optimize their health. Hey, we don't need to do your BMI and blood pressure and cholesterol anymore. We can just come on in, and for, you know, less than $300, it seems to be about a standard or whatever, less than $400, with a really good clinically relevant test, we can definitely point you in the right direction. You
Absolutely.
know? It's amazing. So how do you choose your genes? I mean, I recognize it, right?
Yeah.
How do you do that? How do you put that together?
It all depends on what we're going for. So, like, for example, our very first test was our max food test. And I wanted a weight loss panel. That's what I wanted because that was my issue.
Yeah.
I had gained tons of weight, and I've done everything from keto to paleo to vegan to you name it, I've done it. And nothing was happening. And so I told my geneticist, okay, we basically went full on PubMed lit review and said, okay, what are the genes that are actually relevant from a weight loss perspective, from a carb and fat metabolism perspective, and we made the food panel. And so again, I was the guinea pig there. So before we even released it to the public, I had already done mine and started to, I used to literally handwrite every single report we got.
Oh
no. It wasn't until we had several hundred in 1 week, I was like, oh, okay, we have to automate this.
Right, exactly.
But the people who had the very first rounds several years ago, it was a Word document that was not pretty at all. It was just me writing. But I lost 100 pounds in a year after doing it.
So can you share?
Yeah. So for me,
your SNPs were and how they told you what to do. Because I talked to so many doctors and it's the same response, like a similar, like, oh, game changer. So
yeah. For me, the only thing I changed was I was already gluten-free because I have celiac. So that's been out for a long time. And of course those genes populated. So that was not surprising. My biggest one was intermittent fasting and fat metabolism. I can't tolerate saturated fats whatsoever. So I had been the latest before I did this was I was trying to do keto. And I'm like, everyone else around me is losing weight. Why am I gaining weight? Why do I feel terrible? And I was like paleo keto, kind of in that realm. I wasn't doing any grains, was doing higher fats.
Oh my gosh.
You know, it wasn't like I was eating bacon and butter and that kind of stuff. I was literally eating, you know, grass-fed, grass-finished beef.
Sure, you know, high-quality food. Yeah.
And so I said, okay, I'm going to go low-fat, which went against everything that I was thinking. But I went low-fat because not only am I sensitive to saturated fats, I'm also the ADI-POQ where I can't tolerate fat in general. So I can't really do a high-fat diet. So my only fats, I cut down to the occasional beef, and then olive oil and avocado. So I added in grains a lot of them, which seemed to go against my paleoista feelings. But I added brown rice back in, I added oats back in, and then I started doing intermittent fasting. So I try to do breakfast and lunch and not so much dinner.
Yeah.
But we're social creatures, so it's much easier to skip breakfast.
The other way around. Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we say that in our report, like we tell people to eat maybe between noon and 6, but honestly, I'm probably going to change the language. I think people need to skip dinner instead of breakfast.
Because of the insulin response later in the day. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tough. I know. It's tough
It's
to skip
tough.
dinner. I'm truly European by birth. I grew up there. We eat late. I'm in 8 o'clock in
Yeah.
Southern Europe. Like the restaurants are empty because we start at 10, but we also.
Yeah. So I think it depends. So for the first year, I lost 100 pounds, and I was skipping breakfast, which was great. It works. Now I've kind of shifted because I plateaued. Now I've shifted back to going late, more breakfast and lunch, and not eating so much late at night, and it started to come off again. So I think we also just have to listen to our bodies and realize that we're, we might change by the season. Maybe the winter, pseudo winter we have in Houston makes me want to eat breakfast. So
yeah, the comfort food. So your intermittent fasting is a little bit more like the TRA, time restricted eating, right? Versus like 1,000 one day and 500 the next calories. So it's more that. What I see the most that I get out of your reports, if I'm seeing a lot of SNPs in that particular section, is to reduce the eating window, and people, it's something that's attainable for people because you're not.
That's pretty easy. For me, the fat part was the most eye-opening, and then also dairy. The APOA SNPs that say dairy will actually increase your BMI.
Yeah.
Those are eye-opening, and that's probably the fastest way to lose weight is to cut out dairy if you have that SNP.
Even if you're lactose persistent. So
I have tolerate. Yeah. Exactly. I can tolerate dairy, but I definitely keep weight on or gain it with dairy.
That's an interesting little nugget of information that you learn. I actually learned that from you today, that you learn when you look at information over and over and over again. That's interesting. So going back to your fat, you can tolerate polyunsaturated fats, right, through avocado, olive oil. So it's really sort of totally depleting the saturated fat, obviously letting a little bit in because we need it for membrane structure or whatever, but interesting.
I'll do the occasional butter, and then beef, but I don't go out of my way to consume fat.
Man, that's tough living in Houston. I mean, like, meat is like the state food, right? Beef. So not really, but that's got to be interesting. So it's so interesting how we can be so sensitive. Mm-hmm. So yeah, okay.
And those are little things I changed, and it made the biggest difference. So
yeah, and I think
that's more Mediterranean, I guess.
Yeah, no, totally. So a question I have for you, which I've seen that you can be very saturated fat sensitive. Mm-hmm. Like your genes are, but your lipid profiles could be absolutely normal.
Oh, mine are perfect. Always.
Right. So that's where the labs can kind of not necessarily direct you, right? So the DNA will give you a little bit more insight.
Yeah.
That's
honestly, I see, then this might be my limited patient base in this regard, because I'm mostly taking care of kids anyways, but my adult patients that are sensitive to saturated fats, oftentimes their cholesterol and lipid profile are too low.
Yes.
So, and that's not healthy for your brain either. So I'll have to figure out if I ever do some clinical case studies on that, but I haven't. That's the one thing I've noticed is like my cholesterol, Dr. Arnold's cholesterol, everyone that I have here that is fat sensitive, they often have too low of cholesterol.
Yeah, it's interesting. And their triglycerides can look super great. Everything looks great. And yet they feel terrible.
Yeah.
So interesting. Talk about barking up the wrong tree. The other question I have for you, because we're just talking about cholesterol, and it was a question that I posted like on our internal, nutrigenomic listserv, the one I host, was the number of people have really elevated HDL. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you said, because you're seeing mostly kids, so you wouldn't necessarily see that, but I'm seeing that more and more and more with women. Do you see that at all? And
I see it occasionally, and again, usually with the higher HDL, aren't we thinking more autoimmune, infectious type issues?
Or detoxification, where HDL has lost its antioxidant
Yeah.
potential. Yeah.
I probably have only seen it a handful of times in my patients. Again, mostly kids
Yeah,
here.
you're not going to really see it. I see like
Yeah. I
kind of.
try not to draw blood on 4-year-olds. So
No, we don't need to know that. We hope the HDL is good. But it is interesting, how we may be conventionally trained and what these biomarkers are. But when you add in DNA information, it's like, that is not right. Now, what is going on biochemically in our genomic information? DNA testing allows us to ask those questions.
yeah. And I think we actually put in one gene. I think it's LIPC.
Yeah.
I don't remember the RSD number, but if you consume animal protein, not the fat, but animal protein will actually tank your HDL and cause more issues. So those people are more pescatarian oriented eaters. So there's all sorts of fun stuff with cholesterol as well.
There is. And I think in the end, because you have a very detailed report and it's great, once you're used to working it, you just zoom through it. But that's why I like to use it as a teaching tool for clinicians, because you test a wide array of SNPs. We can look at a lot of different aspects of biochemistry and get a really good picture. But I like, just talking to you, because I pick up these little tidbits too, because we're not all omniscient, right? We do, every day I read literature. It's like, I didn't know that. And then you think, well, how come I didn't know that? Because we're continuing to learn.
Always learning. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we actually, waiting to finalize things, but we did our 2019 lit review and are realizing, okay, there's some other genes that mean more, and then some of these genes are kind of useless. So we're actually going to restructure or make new panels, haven't quite decided, restructure some of the SNPs we look at, because we're constantly learning about their clinical efficacy and usefulness.
Yeah, and what's great about your test, there's, we all talk professionally about, well, which are the best tests and which are the testing companies you recommend? The best 10 testing companies in the world, pretty much you're going to test the same cohort. You might organize them differently, you may add some different, more specialty focus or whatever, but, those of you who are listening, like, you're always asking, well, which companies do you recommend? Well, MaxGen is one I definitely recommend. If you're based in the United States, do you ship outside our borders, Hailey?
We do. But we don't ship to individual patients. We have distributors. So we have a distributor in the UK who ships all over Europe.
Okay.
We have doctors in Australia and New Zealand, but they just like to take care of their own patients. We have people in Canada. Like, we're constantly looking for people in other countries, because it's not very cost effective for us to send one kit out.
Yeah.
But if we can send a box of kits to a particular person and they don't mind shipping, it's much cheaper.
And so there's no issue with them transferring DNA back across the borders? How does that work?
So easy for them to get it to us. It's actually much harder for us to get it out. Like, Germany is a hotbed for nutrigenomic testing, but it's actually illegal for their doctors to do it, from my understanding. So we were having a lot of customs issues shipping to Germany, but we get kits because of our UK distributor. We get kits from Croatia and Cyprus and Singapore and all over. So it's actually just much harder for us to get it outside of our borders.
Oh, interesting. Well, that's good to know. Those of you listening around the world, he's a really good company too. There's a handful that are really, really good. And I like I said, I love MaxGen because I use it pretty much every day. One way or another, there's an order, but it's really great to talk to you, Hailey. We need to talk more, because we can get into the nitty gritty of what we're seeing. And if you see this gene, what you might be thinking clinically, but you also, we'll kind of end here, but you also can sell your test, or do make your test available to the public. If they come to your website, they can order it, they can get the test results, and then you'll connect them with a clinician as well, like a trained person.
A lot of times people will email our help desk, and my customer service team is constantly saying, okay, where are you living? Let's send out a name of someone in your area.
Totally.
And then we're hoping, at least sometime this year, we're going to have a whole directory. So I don't know if you've noticed it, but I am putting together the MaxGen Academy, which is basically
tell us about that.
It's basically a bunch of free videos, and I'm almost done making them for the test itself. So
Great.
it's basically my voice on screen going through, here's how you read your report.
Exactly.
And then we're going to have specific training for all the practitioners that have an account with us. So once they go through that training, I feel comfortable putting you on a directory, because
Totally.
here's how you should use this test, and go forth and use it.
Right.
So that way the public will be able to find practitioners that can actually help them.
And I think that that's important because you have a very good testing you up front, as I'll tell the public, you'll be able to read it, but trust me, you should still
It's
talk to a
overwhelming.
clinician.
Absolutely. And even though we started as a direct to consumer company and we want to maintain that, there's a lot of nitty gritty details in there that unless you are fully into nutrigenomics in a good way and not all the misinformation, then it's going to be a little bit hard to understand for most people.
I think so too, and not to you guys. It is very hard to take DNA information, the amount that you're trying to push through algorithms or whatever, push through our brains and make it simple but scientifically correct and relevant in a short document. So I agree
Absolutely.
with you.
Yeah, and that's, everyone's like, why don't you write down all these tidbits? It's like, your report would be 1,000 pages if I wrote down everything I thought.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's so
difficult.
true. You do not want that. So you try and get to relevant because you have to make it actionable. So
And you also have to pair it with yourself. Like, if you have a specific health history, there may be some genes that are more important to pay attention to than others. So, and I think that's what most people don't understand.
Yeah, and I know when I'm working with your report, I organize it into a storyboard. Man, I use like a visual processor software to distill it so that you jump into what's relevant first, because everything matters, but there's some snips that are going to be more influential than others, and at least it helps the consumer understand you can't do everything at once, but you're going to get the most efficiency out of your biochemistry. We focus here because it impacts this, this biochemical pathway or whatever. So it's an art, but man, once you nail it, it's amazing. Hailey, you've been awesome. I know you have a really busy practice and a very busy company. So I want to thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on. This is fun.
Come on back.
I can talk genes all day. So
me too. Okay. Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.